Hello and welcome to the Linux Saloon. How is everybody?
Fine
Excellent.
and dandy.
Okay.
Great. Yep, great.
Excellent. Today we're going to have a talk about Void Linux. Who's excited for that?
Everyone.
And,
All of us.
And if we're not, don't worry. We still have other things we can talk about. You know, anything that's open source or Linux or tech in general. But remember, Linux is always on tap. So we have coming up, we're going to talk about distro exploration of Void Linux. We're going to check the menu for what's coming up next week. We'll hit a news flight and we'll do our community free pour and last call. But first, I want to hear from Schickel and what he's been Linuxing this week. So he's been doing something a little bit different. It's still Linux, and if you don't like it, tough. So Schickel.
Well,
lay it on
I'm a
us.
charlatan. So recently, Google announced Chrome OS Flex. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, it is essentially a consumer-facing version of Chrome OS, which is supposed to be installable on normal computers, so not Chromebooks. So I've talked a lot about like Cloud Ready in the past. That's basically Chromium OS built for normal stuff. This will be the first version of Chrome OS, which you can just install officially from Google, and it will work with your Android phone. So like your tabs and stuff will move between them. It'll have the full Chrome browser, so not just Chromium. The Google Assistant is actually built into it. So that is kind of new. So Chrome OS has had a little over 100 versions up to this point. This will be the very first one that's actually made for the wider range of consumers who don't want Windows or Mac OS on their devices. So it's pretty cool. Oh, you're muted, Nate.
I did that on purpose.
I really like that there's an alternative now, right? I mean, and I think there's a lot of people that are comfortable with Chrome OS, and yes, we can debate about Google and all the rest of it, but the idea that, I mean, I personally have a low-powered Chrome OS device that runs very, very well, runs a full version of Chrome, the browser, which, you know, considering that so many things that we do nowadays are browser-based, the fact that on a very small, like 10-inch tablet type device, I can do full-blown, you know, I was building websites on it the other day. I mean, is it the best experience in the world? No, because it's small, and you know, I'd rather have a bigger laptop screen and stuff like that. But the fact that I can do it is amazing, and the fact that it's such low-powered hardware. I mean, 4 gigs of RAM. It's a ARM chip. I mean, it's a not a powerful machine at all. And the fact that I can do the things that I do on it. The reason I'm excited about this and to hear Schickel's experience is that I have some older systems that I think this would be perfect on, and I'm definitely curious to see if it's going to run. Now, Schickel, I know it's still sort of in beta or not. Is it even beta at this point, or is it earlier than that?
It's in the dev stage, so I think that's before beta. I would consider this closer to Canary than beta, realistically, but so far, I mean, I'm running a Ryzen 5700U laptop, which is like a very recent Ryzen chip. I actually was not expecting it to even boot because Cloud Ready currently doesn't even have kernel level support for that card. So far, it does seem like it's working. So that's good, but it is definitely closer to early stages than stable right now.
How would you say that you, like, as far as the user experience is concerned, and you said it's early stages, but how user ready is it to like just regular Chrome that you would buy on a Chromebook?
Actually usable, with the exception of the Play Store not being there, almost perfectly. Smart Lock is actually working, which is something that never worked in Cloud Ready. I don't have to type in my full Google password, for instance, to unlock my device. If I just put my finger on the fingerprint sensor on my Pixel, it'll unlock my Chromebook. And I was not expecting that to work at all. Yeah.
So did you put in your fingerprint sensor on that Chrome instance, or was that already like in Chrome somewhere?
It's
like part of your...
It's built in. There's like a toggle. It'll basically just ask you. It's like, hey, do you want to link to your Chromebook? Because I'm signed in on my Pixel. It knows that I have it. If I just click yes, it'll just automatically link them together.
Okay.
So it's both a little scary and really cool at the same time.
So
Yeah, you know-
happy together.
It's not open mic night yet. So there so that's it's interesting. Like we all may have our reservations about Google and privacy and whatnot, but you cannot deny the fact that Google is providing a great product. Like that is an undeniable thing. What they're doing along with that, we can have a conversation about. But what they're doing as far as user experience is concerned, it's actually pretty formidable and something to emulate in some fashion. So, game recognized game on that, I would say.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like I said, I think just having that alternative is really nice because those same devices that I have in mind for this, they run Linux, but modern Linux is not necessarily always the most lightweight thing. You could, obviously there are distributions that are meant to be very lightweight, but I also feel like in some ways there's some trade-offs for that. And who knows, maybe I won't like it, but I know for the purpose of, at least of the device that I have, I've enjoyed it. I think it works fine. So, and like Shickle said, I mean, there's been 100 releases. They continue to update it. There was another release out yesterday. So it's just, they are continuing to update it and improve it and change it. And they've got Linux support and Android support. You can do, there's so much software available to you through Chrome OS because of that. That makes it very interesting.
An interesting aspect of it, I think, right now is that they're migrating from what is a relatively easy path where all of the hardware that ships Chrome OS, I mean, it's tested beforehand, right? Like they build Chrome OS alongside Google for a specific device. And so now they're moving from something like that into what I would consider the wild, wild west of basically just generic hardware support where you have no idea really what you're going to get installed on. And, there's a bunch of different types of Chromebooks out there, but the majority of which are either ARM or Intel based. But seeing people put it on different laptops, MacBooks in particular, because I know they can have some weird things with their touchpad drivers, and seeing them being installed on desktops with random configurations. I think this is going to be an interesting challenge for Google as well. I mean, they're no doubt capable, but that's something that, Windows has had decades of time to benefit from. So they're definitely going in on the deep end here.
Leviticus makes a good point. Chrome OS Flex is a great option for people who have a computer and can install it for school-age children for their schoolwork. And that's absolutely true. I think for my daughter in particular, I think it would be a great. And my daughter's school uses Google Classroom and all of that stuff. So
this will be the first time you can actually have like the full sort of administered sort of Google device modes that is not actually on Chrome OS or Chromebook hardware, which is kind of cool. It'll support those features.
I was a little disappointed that it requires 4 gigabytes because I have an old Chromebook that I wanted to upgrade to this Chrome OS Flex, but that's not gonna be capable.
Those numbers are a suggestion. Just a suggestion.
I think it's a requirement though. I'm not sure. I haven't tested it.
I have no idea. I imagine that's probably just for future compatibility. They're probably trying to shoot higher than lower right now.
Colin, do you have something you wanted to say? I think I trampled all over you like an awful host that I am. So
no,
I
you
apologize.
didn't. No, not at all. I just.
Okay, I'll do a better job of trampling in the future.
No, I was just going to say, I've got this Acer computer here. I've got 3 of them, but I've been using it for my Plex. So it's been serving my Plex with my PCTLC ISO that I did.
Nice.
But it's based on Arch, and it's just you got to log in, every few days. There's so many updates with Arch lately that I've decided. What I should have done when I did it, I should have done a separate data partition, which I didn't do. Now I've got to copy everything over. Is it just me, or copying via USB 3 in Linux is terrible? Is this all to do with that CPU vulnerability a while ago or something? Because I mean, I can't get any more than like 15 megabytes per second on a USB 3 transfer.
You know what? I've been kind of, experiencing that too, Colin. I'd go because I got my Mozilla folder that's got my profile and all my bookmarks in it. It seems like it takes forever for me to hop it on a USB stick from computer to computer.
What file system are you copying it onto, Colin?
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's all ext4.
Yeah,
Oh.
me too.
Huh.
Yeah.
That is
And
definitely
I-
not normal.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Are they
Well,
USB?
actually, I'm pretty sure-
Is it
It's
USB
Sorry?
2 or
blue. It's
3?
got a blue pluggy thingy in it.
USB 3 on my Intel NUC. It's USB. They're all USB 3,
And they're slow.
and it's terrible. And
Huh.
I thought I installed quickly just before we came here. I installed Linux Mint on this Toshiba here. That's all USB 3. So I'm copying over now, but that's still slow. That does. I'm using free file sync. That goes up to about 30, 40, and then it drops back down to about 3 and 4 megabytes. Goes back up to 40 odd. I think that's a buffering thing.
That does sound like cache devices being flushed. It's
Yeah.
definitely interesting that it's not very consistent though.
Yeah,
No,
it's-
it's terrible because I've got 900 gigabytes worth of movies and TV shows. I've got Breaking Bad, and I decided to watch Breaking Bad because I've never watched it before, and all the actual files were all named incorrectly, and I was watching it out of order. My daughter said, "What are you watching? What episode's this?"
Oh, Kyle, that's the worst way to do it.
So
Dazed and
Plex is-
confused.
Yeah, so I've renamed them now, and I thought, you know what I'm going to do? Well, actually, the moral of the story was I'm going to put Peppermint on here because it's got little overhead. It's got hardly any applications on it, the new Peppermint, and it's a rolling distro, so I don't have to reinstall it based on Debian. So it won't have as many updates, I wouldn't think, as what Arch does. So that's what I'm going to do there. I think that's probably good. Now I've got to get all these files off. So if I decide I'm going to change operating system again, it's on a data partition rather than so I can reinstall the operating system. And my daughter gave me this because she doesn't want to use it anymore. It's a Surface Go.
Oh,
So
wow.
what can I install on this? Anybody
Anything
got
you want.
any anything I want? Anyone got
Yeah,
any?
I mean, I'm gonna recommend OpenSUSE, but that's the only thing I know how to recommend.
Sorry,
So
Nate.
I'm-
Sorry.
I'm kind of
Oh, good God.
so. I was gonna say I have years ago. I remember like USB flushing was a thing, but I haven't experienced that in. I don't know. It's got to be probably 4 or 5, maybe 6 years. Where
It's
been
just
an
gotten a
issue.
lot faster.
Because I have this like I have my sneaker net, like when I transfer like large files, like when if I'm gonna edit the show, like not on this machine, like I'm gonna edit in the house for whatever reason. It's like a 4 gig file and a USB 3. I pop it in, I drag and drop it, and like within a few seconds, it's already all over there. And but I've been doing this out for several weeks without issue, and those are the largest files I've had to copy. So I'm a little befuddled. I mean, Leo, you seem to be the one. I mean, the last person I heard complain about USB cache clearing on a podcast
boy.
was from you.
Oh boy.
And so I want to know if you've got some input on this.
I actually don't use a whole lot of thumb drives anymore. I have a 256 gig SSD in a little enclosure that I use, and it copies over so fast I don't notice anymore. But I think you might be referring to my social soapbox of why can't I just rip a USB drive out of the drive whenever the message says I can? Like, you drag a file over and the thing goes across and it's gone. Why is it not done?
Yeah, exactly. I
It's
agree.
done on every operating system except for Linux.
Mac has the same issue.
Oh,
I think.
sorry, Unix.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I don't know. The only time I've ever seen performance like that, where if it's not caching, if it dips and dips and dips, and you have just terrible write performance, is when you have I guess it's like lots of small files when they get copied over. That I see really terrible performance on, no matter what I'm using. But yeah, I mean, as Nate was talking about the 4 gig files, I don't know, Dan keeps giving me these 18 gig video files. So those, the transfer speeds are fantastic on that. But yeah, when you get down small, that's really where I see weird issues. But I haven't really run into any kind of thing like that with larger files anyway.
One thing to note is that pretty much every drive, even hard drives, they all have separate physical caching systems. It is also totally a possibility that like what you're experiencing is not like a software bound thing. It's dumping to the cache, and as soon as that cache fills up, that's where you see that dip. The controller takes whatever data it can, puts it where it needs to be on the permanent storage, and then fills up again, and that's where you get that massive spike in speed again. So that's probably what's happening. USB, you will see that the worst on, because it's pretty much any device transferring over USB-C, unless you're doing like Thunderbolt drives. They're pretty much designed for most of their use cases to be quick bursts of a lot of things, and then dumping it to disk when it's convenient, rather than very large, 400 gigabyte transfers.
Leo, is this the hard drive thing type you're talking about? Because your SSD or notebook hard drive goes on that end. You plug this into your USB port. I get good speed out of this too.
Oh yeah. And
good
sorry
old
for the
SATA.
terrible mic. If I haven't said it before, I hate Zoom, but hey, yeah, those types of devices are fantastic. That's what I use for my SSD.
I think your
That's
mic
awesome.
sounds fine, Leo.
Yeah, Leo,
Yeah.
we're enjoying
I
it.
think it does.
Well, okay, I'm gonna blame Nate.
You switched it over. It sounds better now.
I
Oh,
do.
okay, well,
Leo.
good,
I agree
good.
with you.
You can blame me. I mean, I'm not Joe, but you can blame me. It's fine.
Listen, hashtag blame Nate. If we haven't done it before, we need to start doing it now.
That's fair. I mean, I'd blame me too if I were me.
It's
So-
FM radio quality. On the Late Show.
With David Letterman. All right.
I remember those days.
I missed that. That's when late shows were fun. So I have one thing that I wanted to share with the class. I put together a video on the YouTubes for the build of my Commodore 64 imposter machine that I do all my streams and everything on. It looks like a Commodore 64, but it's not a Commodore 64. It's a modern mini ITX machine, and I really love it. So it took me a long time to actually get it built because I was an idiot, and I admitted in the video that I made many mistakes. And I wish someone would have told me about PC Part Picker. Have you guys ever heard of PC Part Picker?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, you all let me down. They didn't tell me about that years
Sorry.
ago.
That's
All right,
awesome.
so-
I
I thought that was
have
common
stuff from
knowledge.
years ago.
It is
Nate,
common knowledge.
whenever you build a PC, you use PC Part Picker.
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
I used it for mine.
Where were you a year ago?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Building my own.
so I'm grateful. It's it's been running for some time now, but I finally actually finished the video, and I had a lot of fun doing it, and it's the first of a series of things I'm going to do with this computer and so forth. But anyway, so I was just glad that I finally got a video together, because people who do video editing, like those people on YouTube that just like crank out videos like as often as they do, I don't know how they do that and not put a fist through their screen at some point in time.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of respect for anybody that can that can do this video editing like that. So anyway,
There's some out there that got to have a video at least every 2 days or less. I
Yeah,
don't know
it's
how they
nuts.
do it.
I don't either. It's an amazing talent,
You have-
amazing
you have-
skill.
You have to have a system, and you have to have an editing app that works with you and works well.
But on top of that, to think of a topic for each video as you're cranking them out every other day.
Some things
You have
I
a
mean, they just-
backlog of topics. Come on.
yeah, they just build on each other. Honestly, some things really just sort of you get on a roll.
Yeah, I have lots of topics. To me, it's the being able to commit to actually complete a video. That's really the trick. in all
I mean,
honesty.
I just started making videos on a completely separate topic than technology, and I made 18 videos in a month. I mean, and that just was like rolling them out, and they come to you and you just do it, and a lot of it comes down to how fussy are you going to be about it, you know.
Very. That's the
So
problem.
that is the problem. If you're going to be super fussy and you put, 6, 8, 10 hours into every video, then yeah, you can't do it every day because then that's your job, But if you can film it and just chop down, edit down the pieces you need, put in your transitions and your titles and intro, and yeah.
Well, the thing is, I like to script stuff out. Like 'cause I want to have like a good thing that I follow. And tell a story, not just ramble, because I can ramble like the best of them. And then so I find that like I'll write a script and then I'll read through the script and I'll actually record it, and then I'm like, this script sucks. I'm gonna just trash it and redo it. And I did that probably 3 or 4 times on this video. So it's my fault. I guess.
See, when you start rambling, you just delete that footage from your video editor.
It's true.
Never
You can do that too. It's true. But then again, I didn't like the script.
What you can do is you can talk about the same subject, just do it a couple of times, and then you choose which one you think is the best while you're editing, and then you take out the rest of it, right? So you can just modify it slightly as you're filming, and then you choose the best one while you're editing. Sometimes that works too.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I thought I'd share that. It's I guess maybe I could probably share a link of the video. I'll think of that eventually. Anyway, so that's it. I wanted to share that. Kind of excited about that as a personal victory.
Yeah, I want the link. I want to watch.
All right. So on to the next thing. Okay, so Steve is not here, unfortunately. So
Steve
I will.
Is not here.
No, he's not here. So
Grab the
I'm going to go.
pitchforks.
Well, he had something like family, like people in real life that he was meeting with or something like that. I don't know, something lame, right?
I wish
I'm
I
kidding.
had a family.
Oh, you have Shickle.
This
You have
got
an
sad real fast.
Just
You
get
have a-
cats.
you have
A
an
family.
e-family. You have an e-family, Shickle. You have an e-family. There, you don't know if we're actually real. We could all be deep fakes, and you don't really know.
Yep. I'm
All right, so
controlled by my cat overlords.
Yeah. I have one cat, and it likes me, but I don't like it. All right. So our distro exploration is void Linux. So some rules. The intent is to talk about the different aspects of the operating system and discuss the experiences after using it. This is a discussion by which only objective and constructive conversations about the product will be made. Any non-objective opinions like this is garbage, not helpful, or anything like that, please refrain from that. But if you say things like, I wish it had, feature X or Y, that's helpful to the developers and other people who might be interested in knowing about Void Linux. So we, some people might need specific features, and that's understandable. And so you can voice that. We like to make sure that this conversation is beneficial to everybody and not demeaning. So the point is to highlight the positives, but not to ignore the lowlights of the project. And remember, this is a labor of love from somebody out there on the internet. So let's not poo-poo on their project. So Eris, I don't know if you want to go ahead and go with the straw poll that we had in the Telegram.
So the poll is, how is the Void Linux exploration going? 9% said Void Linux is amazing. It fills a gap in my heart. 20% says...
You gotta let that joke sink in.
Yeah. 20% says Void Linux is okay. 11% says I'm not having a good time with Void Linux. 20% says I'm not interested in trying Void Linux. 14% said I'm unable to do the exploration this week. 17% said I'm not interested in doing the explorations in general. 9% said other. And then the responses that I got to the poll itself, I haven't had a chance to try out the beyond trying and failing right into the stream.
That was me.
I need to RTFM.
Yeah, that was me.
Meaning read the fantastic manual.
Yep, that's that means, yeah. Nailed it.
And then another response I got, I've installed it once in a VM just to make sure I could before I attempt to do live on tomorrow's night stream. It threw some interesting twists, but I got through it, put it into vanilla XFCE. I played around with a few things like installing the Whisker menu. Of course, watch me run into a snag tomorrow during the live stream, never fails. And the final reply I got was, I've already used it and have since moved on to other distros.
So I'm going to go through a little bit of a background on Void Linux. It's an independent distribution, which I always have great respect for independent distributions because it's a lot of work to build packages and to have your own repositories and managing the servers and just all that stuff. So that's a mark of someone who has a lot of dedication to what they're doing, in my opinion. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with distros that build off of other distros, but I mean it's a whole separate set of challenges. So, but you also have a lot of control. So I get why they would do it. So anyway, it's an independent distribution developed entirely by volunteers. The name Void comes from the C literal void. It was chosen rather randomly and is void of any meaning. Void is a general purpose operating system based on the monolithic Linux kernel. Void focuses on stability rather than on being bleeding edge. Install once, update routinely and safely. Software is provided in binary packages or can be built directly from sources with the help of the XBPS source package collection. The native system package manager is the X binary package system, or XBPS. The XBPS source is the XBPS package builder, like I just mentioned. Both are written from scratch with a 2-clause BSD license. xbps-src builds the software in containers through the use of Linux namespaces, providing isolation of processes and bind mounts, among others. No root required. Additionally, xbps-src can build natively or cross-compile for the target machine and supports multiple C libraries, glibc, and musl currently. Void uses runit and the init system and service supervisor. Runit is a simple and effective approach to initialization with reliable service supervision, and that's as opposed to using something like systemd. And I agree with that because as I started installing things, I installed GNOME, so I had to have GDM auto start and network manager, and it's literally just creating a link, soft link in a specific directory. Anything in there gets automatically initialized or run at boot time. So very straightforward. It seems very straightforward. I haven't spent enough time with it to know yet, but I can see how that would be a much simpler. And again, it follows the Linux or the Unix philosophy of do one thing. It's an init system that does one thing versus systemd, which does all kinds of things. So anyway, so for the ISO options, there is a 64-bit, a 32-bit ARM, and then images for the Raspberry Pi. And there is a console-only installer, or I guess ISO. You can it's a live image, but it's console only. And then there's also an XFCE version as well.
They used to have a Plasma and Mate. I think maybe LXD ISOs as well a year ago.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure why they decided to drop them, except XFCE. Maybe they didn't have the capacity to maintain them.
It could be that. It could just be that it was more overhead for them to manage, and it could be that they weren't popular. I mean, this is certainly not a beginner's distro, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of sort of steps you have to go through that maybe a novice Linux user might not feel comfortable doing, because even on the XFCE desktop, you still have to install it from a command prompt, and you have to know how to do partitioning and setting up your boot options and things like that. And it's a little, I think, a little more advanced than so maybe it was that what they found was that having additional ISOs wasn't really helpful because people who are using it are expecting to sort of roll their own.
The documentation references flavors. I guess that was existed at one time, and I don't know if they still exist.
The latest ISOs photos were February last year, but there is a website called voidbuilds.xyz that has unofficial builds for each desktop.
Did you notice that there were different options for C compiler? There's glibc and musl.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Did anybody use
What's
musl?
the difference?
I did.
I did not. Yeah.
And it didn't boot.
It didn't boot. What can somebody explain to me what the difference is between glibc or glibc, whatever you want to call it, and
Ooh, I like glib.
and muscle?
Glib sounds good.
It's my
Glib?
understanding that muscle's faster. I think that's the difference. I'm not sure though.
But it
I
also
did read that somewhere.
less supported as far as some desktop software goes. Like I think if you want to compile various browsers, for example, well, I know they have Firefox, but if you wanted to compile maybe a Chromium-based browser, the chances are that it wouldn't run, or maybe just the binaries wouldn't run, because most binaries for desktop software are compiled against glibc. So, for example, if someone wanted to do gaming, they would have to go with glibc. There was someone in the Void Telegram, I think, who dropped a wisdom. He said glibc for the desktop and muscle for the server. So probably muscle has some use cases where it's a better choice.
It could be. I just think it's interesting because it's not GNU. So Void Linux wouldn't be GNU/Linux. No one can make that argument. That's actually why I like it. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, it's still GNU because even though it does, if you don't use the glibc, which is the GNU C library, it still uses the GNU utilities.
It does.
As opposed to something like Alpine, which doesn't really use any of the GNU stuff.
Okay. Well, there you go. I was rebuffed. All right. So were there any installation issues besides me from anybody else? Okay. Lay it on us, Eric. Go ahead and start.
I plowed ahead like an idiot without reading the manual. That was my answer that Eris read. You know, I just was like, oh, I'll just make partitions and I'm sure it's just like, you know, and I failed miserably, and then it was too late in the evening to pick it back up. And so when I went back to it, I actually did read the manual, except that the documentation is pretty light. And I tried a couple of different things, and I wasn't getting further along. And I think using a virtual machine can certainly complicate things at times, because I couldn't quite tell if it wasn't booting because of what I was doing in the partitioning, or if it wasn't booting because of the virtual machine. And so I had to kind of get past that. But today I reinstalled it just to make sure I understood what I had done previously, and I did. I was able to get it installed very quickly, and then ran the updates after the install, and then was able to install GNOME, Xorg, GNOME, and that stuff. And so I have it up and running, and Flatpak installed, and some different things. Some other things I'll bring up later on. But yeah, it was fun once I actually took the time to understand what I was doing instead of just running in like an idiot.
Well, for me, it reminded me of the days of old, of like when the first time I think ran Debian, I had to partition everything manually. I thought that was very, very granular. Anybody else have anything they wanted to?
And this was called the incurses installer, I believe, right?
Right, Mark.
And I of course, I thank you so much. I think it was Eris that posted the link to the one of the video reviews, or the old tech bloke Void Linux video. I ended up watching that, and there was a clue in there in the partitioning where he says that he just used BIOS instead of EFI. And of course, I was having issues with the partitioning and couldn't tell which way to boot. I ultimately went with the BIOS mode finally, and that seemed to make things a little bit easier. And then when and then when you're in the partitioning scheme, it says if you're going to use BIOS, you need that little boot partition. So that's what made it work for me. Absolutely had to get some reference going. Yeah,
I had a very interesting problem, which wasn't as much user error, but for some reason, on my laptop at least, the setting up the network, the Wi-Fi in the installer would fail. And I found multiple threads about it on Reddit. They said that if you exit the installer and then set up the internet via WPS applicant from the command line, and you get to the point where it works, and you get back to the installer, you fill out your Wi-Fi, the SSID and the passcode, and it will be able to configure it properly. So I've done a couple of installations throughout the past 6 months or 6 or 7 months. So at one point I just gotten used to this, and yeah. But other than that, I don't think I really had any problems with the bootloader. I've done all the installations in UEFI mode.
Is there a show of hands of who used the actual desktop to install it versus the command line only mode? Like, so XFCE, what did you use XFCE to install it?
I did.
I did, but I had I ran
You
the
CLI
terminal.
only guys are brave.
Well, you know what? We've been on it for the last 2 distros. I was getting really comfortable with that desktop.
XFC doesn't really give you anything though, other than a desktop. You still have to open a terminal. It's the same thing.
It's kind of a response to the Wi-Fi thing. That's what it gives you. It gives you the ability to get onto Wi-Fi without having to hack around with configuration files and trying to figure out IWL Wi-Fi or whatever it is. So and I knew that going in. So I just thought I would save myself some heartache and 20 minutes of hacking away on configuration files and just run XFCE, even though it's my least favorite desktop.
Really?
It helped a lot.
Really?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well,
Why?
yeah.
We can grill him later. We don't need to grill him
Yeah,
on
there
his
we go.
preferences now. Because
So
that's not...
I have a question. Who actually did the Void Linux on hardware? Okay.
2 hardwares.
You know, I didn't, but I am compelled enough now, having gone through the install a couple times and setting up the desktop and seeing how much software is actually in their repositories, that I am going to try it on hardware and see if I could give it a go.
What's interesting, it's only about, it's less than 8,000 packages compared to something like OpenSUSE, which has 14,000 and Fedora has 22,000.
But to be fair, how many of those do you use?
So it's shockingly low. For example,
all 14,000.
Do you? You have them all, Nate?
No, I don't.
But what's interesting, even though it's a low package count, it still has some of the stuff that, for example, I use Launcher for my launcher on XFCE, and the Debian repos don't have it, Arch main repos don't have it, the web repos had it.
So Norbert, but are you talking about the difference between precompiled and the source? Or
yeah, I'm only talking about the precompiled packages.
Okay, because you can compile your own, and I think that kind of gets you around a lot of that, you know?
Yeah, I think it's roughly double the number. In the source repo, it's maybe around 15,000.
Yeah, so that I think that's the other reason I want to try it on hardware, is I want to try to do some building from source and do some things like that, because I think that would be interesting, you know. And so anyway, Ben, go ahead.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Well,
great.
I did try Void on this laptop, this Lenovo Gaming Legion 5 thing. And the one thing that I did not care for, that I personally would like to see, is, I don't know if I just missed it or what, but there was a lack of a Gooey package manager that I don't know if I missed it or what. But
I couldn't find one either.
There isn't one.
There isn't one.
Well, there is.
Well, there is one, but it's not installed by default. There's one called so it's similar to Octopi on Arch. It's called
Arch, yeah.
Octo XBPS.
Yeah, that not being there by default kind of perturbed me a little bit. But other than that, you know, the XBPS package system seemed okay, but you know, it wasn't exactly what I would call my thing personally.
Yeah.
But regardless, I mean, you know, it's okay, like I said, but you know, other than that, you know, I could not figure out how to get my NVIDIA driver installed simply, but that was also one of the things that, you know, you see, Lenovo, when I bought this machine, had the internal AMD graphics switched off in the BIOS, and I was not wanting to turn that on just to test this system. So, you know, that was one thing that I just could not stand to do. So regardless, that was one deterring factor as well. But other than that, the distro I had no complaints about. So yeah.
Good. Colin, did you have something? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think it's justifiable to not have the graphical packages manager by default because, well, in almost every sense of the word, Void is pretty much a do-it-yourself distro. So I mean, even if you use an ISO with the XFCE, there's two options on the install from the network or from the ISO itself. And I always do the network install because then I don't have to update anything after the installation, but then it doesn't install the desktop environment, so you have to install it as well. And I think the NVIDIA driver installation is in the handbook, but so basically there's a non-free repo that is not enabled by default, and you just have to install that repo, and then there's a package simply called NVIDIA. And if you install it, it will build all the kernel modules during the installation.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks. I'll next time I delve into Void, I will look into that.
I think Nate kind of nailed it because it does very much feel like 10 years ago, right? Or maybe even longer in Linux, where there was an expectation that you controlled a lot of the system administration yourself manually. And so anyway,
yeah, okay, this is the deal. I'm normally like Eric, right? I normally go in gung-ho, whatever. I thought this time I'm going to read the manual, right? So I did it first on real hardware, needed wireless, WPA supplicant. Don't even get me started on that. I just could not work. I don't know how long I spent on that alone. And I thought, had enough, went to VirtualBox, right? Then I tried in VirtualBox. I installed the GNOME desktop. I did the links, like you said, and it didn't show up. Just kept coming up with back to terminal, login, and that was it. So I don't know what was going on there. And then I downloaded the XFCE one, put it on the real hardware again, like Leo said, that gives you the wireless, right? So you still got to do stuff in terminal, right? I understand that. But now I've got wireless, so I'm okay to go. So then I did everything else, did the links and everything. Didn't boot in UEFI. So then I had to change to Legacy. So did that and then got all the installation done, did the links and stuff, and still just booted into just a terminal command line. So I don't know. I must have been doing something wrong. I must have missed something in the documentation there somewhere when it comes to installing. I thought just GDM would have been enough to install the GNOME desktop.
There's dbus has to be enabled as a service.
Yeah, so
I'm sure I did. Yeah, I'm sure I did the dbus as well. I'm sure I did that.
So what I enabled was GDM, dbus, and network manager.
Yeah,
those
that
three.
should be enough.
I mean, the commands were pretty straightforward. What was it? Something status, check status, whatever. And it kept saying that GDM wasn't there. Kept saying dbus wasn't there. I tried the links, and
Colin,
it just kept saying nothing was there.
Take a look at that link. I'm going to put a link in the chat, and I was having similar issues, and then I followed this guy's.
Oh yeah, I got your link.
Yeah,
I got your link. Yeah.
Look at that, because honestly, it's a very stripped down, simple explanation, and
right.
That helped me get past my installation issues. And from there, the documentation for Void is I can follow it. I was just having issues with partitioning and getting the services going, and I had really good luck with that tutorial.
So I didn't need to do a search for the book for Linux for Dummies, did I? Because I thought that's what I needed at the time.
No,
I live by that book.
Give yourself enough credit. You really don't. You have now, I've seen this over the last, close to 3 years now. I mean, I've seen you, conquer mountains in the Linux realm, coming from your perspective. And I don't think it's anything to do with your knowledge or lack thereof. I think it was just some sequence of things that wasn't being done in the right order or something,
I found the website, the documentation is there. It seems to be somewhere correct, but I found that the order of the documentation, it's like when you go from one thing to another, it goes back up to the top. So you lose where you were in the left-hand side link, right?
Yeah.
So that in itself was very confusing. And then you had to open in different tabs, otherwise you get lost. And the chills up and down my spine when I was going through the Arch install just came back. It was like, oh my goodness, I'm jumping from here, there to everywhere to try and find this documentation. And I think you can easily get lost in trying to do things in order, and it doesn't work out the way you want it to. And and I think that's where, at the point that I got, it was frustration. I said, I'm done. I've had enough. I normally don't give up, but I was done. I was gone. Couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm with you, and I definitely had some frustrating moments with it. But the thing that I think is interesting to me is I have not paid attention to, nor have I cared much about the whole systemd argument. And so to me, this is the first time where I've actually run something that forced me to use something else and sort of really think about, like, what does systemd give us? Yes, there's a lot that it brings to the table. But at the same time, you know, what alternatives are there? And I think it's just healthy for me to understand those things so that I know what they are. I don't know that I'm going to run it.
Last week was a knit V.
Well, the thing, the thing is, I think since we've changed to systemd, I don't know whether this is just from my perspective, but when we were, what was the original one before that? Was init, was it, or something like that? Is that
probably
the one?
just init?
Init. So I honestly believe that booting time slowed down when systemd came in. I quite often found, or is it just that there's, we've progressed so much that there's so many things starting up on boot or something. I'm not sure, but
there are more services now.
There are so many services that start and even not even on start and shutdown, right? You get those shutdown jobs and stuff like that. Yeah, that stuff used to not happen. I agree with you, and it can be really frustrating whenever you have something that hangs up where it's saying 3 minutes of indefinite, like it's just going to sit there forever and count down. I mean, there's some things that don't get handled very, very well, I think. And yes, sometimes it's amazing how heavy it feels,
Yeah,
I fought systemd for a long time also, and then I basically had to commit to it because I needed to understand it and know it.
Yeah,
and then same with host name control, and time control. I had journal control. I had to learn all those things. And so in this install, I had this sinking feeling when it went back to this other system. I was like, oh no, let's not go back there.
You thought you'd escaped it.
Who posted the desktop picture? Was that Norbert? Norbert was successful. He sounds like he knows a little bit about it. But I was jealous and envious of his desktop, his Void desktop.
Yeah, I've been for the past 7 months. I've been using Void on and off as my daily driver. At a couple of times, I had to fall back to Arch, where things just would ironically work better. For example, I had quite some trouble with pipeware. Just before the stream, I wanted to log on from my Void installation just to be authentic, to log on the stream from Void, but Zoom was acting up and I couldn't get it working. I did neither the Flatpak or from the browser, so I ended up falling back again, this time to Fedora, which I moved from Arch to Fedora. So having a more mainstream distribution is a good thing if you want something to work, turns out. But I do like tinkering with voids.
That's great. I'm gonna hopefully do it myself too. Dan, you've had your hand up for a long time.
Yeah, I came into this and I didn't know nothing about Void at all. So I did find the manual for it and started with the manual. Otherwise, I wouldn't even got off the ground without the password and the Void dash installer and stuff like that. I had put it on my Dell computer, my really old one that we talked about audio problems with. It had a lot of trouble with the installer because I kept forgetting to put the /boot in for the mount point, even though there was a star for bootable. You know, once I figured that out and got back, and it's a non-EFI machine, so I had to work around that and kind of experiment which would work. And after about 4 or 5 installs, I finally got it to take off. Well, while I was building it and everything else and adding stuff to it, I started it up the next day and the computer just wouldn't start. It died. The BIOS and it's dead. No prompt, no nothing. It's blinking cursor when it starts up and you get nothing else.
Oh man.
That's my favorite screen right there. Like, what can you do? Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, you can't do nothing. So I set that aside and I got my second choice, which is my HP computer that I got here. And then I went to installing this thing, and every time I do an install, I got it just right because I put it on top of another multi-partition install on this machine because I had Peppermint on this one. And the installer would go right past the credentials and the name for the user. It'd go right from root password and skip over it. And I wasn't paying attention. And I get to the end, get it all installed, and then I couldn't log in. It just, it was irritating. So I went through about 4 or 5 installs before I discovered what it was doing. And then I got it installed and everything, and I started adding bits and pieces and reading and stuff like that, looking at posts and I don't remember what I did, but I did get the audio to work. I installed the ALSA and Pulse audio. It seems like though this thing comes up with controls and stuff like that. It comes up short with them on the taskbar. Like there is no widget to raise the volume up and down. You have to open a terminal and use the ALSA mixer to lift the volume up and down. Little things like that I've noticed.
Yeah, you'd have to add that in yourself. I mean, again, that's very much the box of Legos approach. You know, everything's
right.
You have to put it all together. Yeah,
it's
Legos,
a build your own thing.
Box Legos, but with the manual that's kind of ripped apart because you have to like piece it together. The manual.
Well, and it's 7 different sets of Legos, so none of the pieces really go together. You know.
You have to go to the section of the box you want to work on, you know, at the time. But I read a lot of other stuff across. The other laptop that died, I figured out though, because I did an upgrade for the Void, the minus SU command. It will completely upgrade it for you, and it brought down the 515 kernel. The other laptop would not boot on the 515. It went into kernel panic. It only do the 513. So that the 515 is end of life on that particular thing. I think it just knew that and died, knowing it was coming.
You scared it.
Oh goodness.
What is an interesting kernel management, because each major kernel version, so 5.15, 5.16, 5.17, etc., they have separate packages. So you can install, I think the default, just if you install
it left the 5.13 kernel in place. It didn't take it out, so I could always use the grub manager and go down to the next one and start.
Yeah. For example, when I was on 5.13 and I looked at it, I realized it was end of life, the kernel version. And I looked at my Void installation, I checked for upgrades, there was no upgrades. Then that's when I learned that I had to go and install Linux 5.15 manually and the headers for it to be able to get the newer kernel.
I tried really hard to get into this so I could play with the big boys, you know, and work on something
Dan,
like this.
I love the fact that you stick with it. I really do. I've always told you that, but I have great respect for the fact that you do not give up.
Well, thank you.
All right. So that was mainly to cover the installation process. It sounds like we had some varying degrees of success and some frustrations, but what would you say in terms of, I mean, so normally we would cover the default application selection, but in this case, there aren't any. Yeah,
Right.
so it's what you put on. So again, I installed GNOME and I did the GNOME apps meta package that brought in a lot of different, all of the sort of GNOME stuff. which included tweaks, which was nice. I thought that was a nice touch. I thought I was gonna have to go install it, and I didn't.
It does come with Firefox, all right?
No, it had GNOME Web. It had,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So I mean,
I
but
got
this is,
ESR with my package.
did you? Okay, well, so maybe some of the
It came
meta
with
packages have that.
XFCE.
Yeah, it probably is bundled in with some of those package meta
And
packages.
XFCE was fairly easy to set up the Wi-Fi. All you had to do is put in your name of your modem, the keys, and the password.
Okay,
Yeah,
but
mine
that was
came with
probably using Network
Firefox,
Manager.
so-
Yours did come with Firefox?
Yeah, I installed the XFCE desktop.
Oh, okay, excellent. Well, that's, yeah, so you probably got the ESR. Yeah, I had GNOME does not. It just came with web, which is normal. That's what GNOME, that's how they, if you does Fedora come with Firefox? I'm trying to think of like the very GNOME centric distros and whether or not Leo's saying yes.
Fedora comes with Firefox, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Leo's definitely giving it the nod.
Yeah. Jinta, go ahead. What do you got, man?
I didn't have that many troubles with the installer, believe it or not. I got it to install because I watched someone else do it on a video because I'm not that bright. And
Or maybe you are that bright because you actually watched a video.
you were smarter than we
Hey,
were.
I'm bright enough to know my own stupidity. Oh wow. It just crashed and burned like so many times after you know what I mean? I would try stuff out and use it a little bit and just go through what programs that were in it. And I couldn't shut down or lock up. And I had all kinds of issues with it like that. And I'm wondering if anybody else had the same kind of issue.
I did with
Okay.
okay, not nearly to that extent. On XFCE, for some crazy reason, it wouldn't restart or shut down or log out.
That was the same thing I had. Yes,
It would just hang
exactly.
out.
Mhm.
I tried to install Lumina because I know the guy that originally started Void came from a BSD background, so I was like, well, Lumina, it's you know, underneath agnostic, so it doesn't really care. Had the same issue there, and it wasn't until I blew all of it away and installed Plasma that it started respecting, you know, shutdowns, restarts, and things like that. So I don't know if it was XFCE or something else.
I did XFCE. It sounds like we had the same issue. Okay, I feel a lot better now.
Sorry, what was the exact issue with the shutdowns and restarts?
It didn't.
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
it just
okay.
did nothing or locked up.
That's always fun. Eris.
So I appreciated before I started doing the install that in the documentation it explained what the dollar symbol means and what the hash mark means, because that's one thing that the Arch installer doesn't do. It doesn't tell you at all what that means when you do the commands. So beforehand, it does tell you that in the documentation. So I appreciated that. I tried it first by doing I thought I had to set up my own partitions. So I did my own partitions, and then I installed the base, and I think I went for the minimal Xorg, and then I went and looked up the Plasma package, which is like Plasma Desktop. I installed that. It did not work for me. There was like a white screen, and I was getting like terminal windows, and that was it. So then I did a reinstall, and I went for the big XOR package, and I actually read more the documentation, and I noticed that there is an installer that tells you like how to make the partitions, and it guides you a little bit through it, not that much, but I mean, and then I did the KDE5 install, and it worked, and it booted up correctly. I didn't get as far as building a package though, which I would have liked, because as Linux user space has mentioned, the developer of Void was a BSD guy, and this is like their big lineage like thing that you can build packages in the same way that BSD does. And it's interesting also because I remember in the about info, it specifically says that that they license the package manager and the source package manager as the BSD license, which is kind of rare, I guess, for a Linux project. But I mean, it works, but I think for the documentation, you do have to go back and forth a lot because it's not very clear at points. So you probably have to read everything and then do it, not go step by step, because then you're gonna miss something somewhere. as far as like run it, you know how like you're supposed to make symlinks in order to activate the services and stuff like that.
XBPS seems to have ridiculously minimal package dependencies, because you mentioned how it wasn't very straightforward installing Plasma. So for example, when on Fedora, you install the entire GNOME group, because if maybe you don't want the additional packages like GNOME Maps or GNOME Photos and stuff like that. If on Fedora you just install GNOME Shell, it will pull all the necessary dependencies. It will pull GDM, it will pull even Pipewire and Flatpak. So if we have everything for a GNOME session, that just works. If you do that on Arch, you have to explicitly install stuff like GNOME Keyring and GNOME Control Center, because it's a more minimal package dependent system. Void takes it to an entire new level. On Void, if you don't want to install the entire GNOME group, just GNOME Shell, you have to separately explicitly install GNOME Shell, GNOME Session, GDM, I think GNOME Control Center even. So it seems to, I mean, I will say that the package dependencies seem to be limited to stuff, just enough stuff to make it work. But it seems like it's even less, because what Arch did is what I would consider just works, the just works level. So when I just installed GNOME Shell and GNOME Session, but left out GDM, even if I had a different login manager, GNOME just wouldn't start.
So are there because I didn't get this far, in Void Linux, are there like package patterns that you can install, or meta packages, so that when you want the Plasma desktop, it pulls everything in, so you're all set. It's very simple to install. Is that a thing they do in Void Linux?
Yeah, they have some packages for similar to how Arch and Debian does. So if you just want to install XFCE on either one, you can just install the group XFCE. I think you can do the same on Void. I'm not sure if it's called XFCE or XFCE4, but for example, I don't think it has the XFCE goodies package group. I think if you want to have all the functionality of XFCE, you would have to install those separately, or maybe it includes that. I don't remember, but there are package groups.
Interesting. All right, in an effort to keep things moving along, a general user experience with using Void. What would you say that like your general experience? So Norbert, you seem to be a fan of Void Linux, so at least I'm picking up on that.
Yeah.
How would you describe your overall general user experience for it?
Well, you know how a bird would teach their offspring fly by just kicking them out of the nest.
Yes,
is an analogy that people like to use for Arch. I would say Void in some aspects Void is even more do-it-yourself, but in some aspects it's less so. Because
so it's like kick you out of the nest, but with a parachute. Would you say that?
Yeah, maybe because I mean
with a manual more than a parachute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. How to fly? Yeah,
soften your soften your landing.
Yeah, because I mean the installation process is way more present than for Arch.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, you still have to have a concept of what are mount points and what partitions you need to have, but overall the package management, I think, I picked up on the package management from just the handbook. They used to have a wiki, but it's deprecated, so it's just a handbook. And I think it was pretty straightforward. What I got me interested in first is how fast installing packages was. And you said I was a fan of Void, which is a really interesting way to put it, because if I had to choose just one single distribution that I had to use for the rest of my life, I would probably go with Fedora, because it's just how functional it is. But if I wanted to wear a T-shirt or some other stuff with the distribution logo, it would be Void, because the way I see it is it's like having two cars. I'm dual booting Fedora and Void. Void is the car that the car enthusiast would tinker with, but if he has to get around, he would go into the Fedora car. So I think Arch was covered recently on the show, right?
Arch? You said Arch?
Yeah.
We haven't done straight Arch in like 2 years or something, like 3 years, maybe 2 years.
Okay. If someone knows what the Arch user experience is, I would say it's really similar. people sometimes say that it's similar to Slackware, and I tried Slackware after I tried Void. When my first impression of the Slackware installer was like, well, this feels like Void. So I would say Void is kind of like Slackware, but it's a distribution that managed to keep up more with the modern standards than Slackware. It's like a retro futuristic stuff. It feels old school, but it's still very much functional.
I got you. All right, Leo.
So, I guess there's just some things that you have to be aware of when you're diving into this. If you manage to get past the installer, and it sounded like some of us did not, you do have to get to the point where, well, I think you have to be, before you even start, have to be comfortable with the command line. Some of the things just don't work unless you are okay with that, like Bluetooth. If you wanted anything Bluetooth to work, you had to link the service. And now,
when you say link the service, you mean you have to actually go more than just activate the service? You have to add other links to it?
You do.
It's just like Arch. You have to start your own services and make sure they automatically start.
And I think
oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
I think a lot of people have gotten used to systemd, so when you encounter runit, you kind of are taken aback a little bit. What you mean? I have to link a thing into a directory to make it know that it's going to start? And yeah, so you have to be okay with more than just like system control. The other thing, I think when I was doing Void, I was comparing it a lot to Arch, because Void has pretty up-to-date packages, and one of the things that I noticed was Void has ever so slightly, at least the packages that they do first-party package, are more up-to-date in a lot of cases than Arch, and that was very surprising to me. The other big thing that I noticed was it's a little more sane than Arch when it comes to updating packages. I think in Arch, the infamous, Pacman capital SYU or SYYU or S roll your D20 YU, because I mean, I don't know any package manager that, if you're going to do updates, why wouldn't you update the listings before you update your packages, when in Arch you have this big asterisk saying, if you don't update that list, you're going to run into issues. Well, just do it. And that's what XBPS does. There's no why involved unless you just want to say yes to install everything. So
right.
in Arch, that was my thing. I thought that's what the why meant. That is not what the why means in Pacman. In XBPS, it is.
Nothing in Pacman means what you think it means.
That's true.
They're just actually random letters. They didn't actually think
they
about
are.
what
It's
letters
ridiculous.
are. It's kind of like, yeah, let's use a Y there or whatever.
Yeah.
Two Ys.
Y means refresh, Nate. Come on.
I mean,
how did you not guess that? How did you not guess that?
My only thing that I've often thought is this must have been developed in a different language than English, right? I mean, because like, why is S the letter you use?
Arch is German, isn't it? Arch is
German for Arch.
Arch is actually Canadian.
Oh, is it Canadian?
Yes.
Oh, I'm thinking of Manjaro. Sorry.
Must be French Canadian.
Yeah, I was gonna say French. Maybe what kind of word starts with Y in French that means refresh?
Right. Ye fresh.
Yeah, that's it.
The origin of Arch Linux.
Is that
the origin of Arch Linux is Arch enemy, Arch Linux, like that.
Oh,
that's the origin of Arch.
By the way.
Okay.
All right.
Nate, do you mind if I jump in real quick?
I don't mind at all.
Yeah, you said something about Void and Legos and stuff. So without instructions, I tried to make the Void logo. I'm not sure. It's kind of horrible, but there we go.
I think it's great.
I built Void without instructions.
There you
That's
go.
Bravo.
Perfect.
Now you're gonna hurt yourself later. I hope you got shoes on. Ben.
But you can, I want to comment on the previous one. You can actually just leave out the S altogether from the XBPS install, because for Arch, you just update with Pacman. But what Void does is it has separate binaries for XBPS install, XBPS remove, XBPS query, which is the one you search with. So my take is that when you type XBPS -install, then the install part is what represents what the S in Pacman would. And when you type xbps install su, then the S is the equivalent of the Y in Arch. So if you just do xbps dash install, and you can actually, if you can just do the -u, you can just leave out the S. But the thing is, how would your system know what updates we have if you don't update the package list?
Yeah,
sure.
Well, sync. So S stands for sync, and in that case, it makes a whole lot of sense because you're syncing everything up before you go and actually run the updates, which is beautiful. It makes sense when if you can, if you actually break it up and think about it. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah. So based on that, for Pacman, the Y is that one is the one that means sync. Because
yes, Y means sync. Yeah. Why didn't I know that?
Of course it does.
Good
well,
call. Yeah.
maybe it stands for yowing the package lists.
We're not going to try and
Alright.
justify
Yeet.
any of Arch's or
Yeet
Pacman's
is like
poor syntax. It's not justifiable. Ben, you have had your hand up. I don't want to skip over you too often.
Sorry. All right. Well, anyway, I am very impressed with Void as a distro as a whole, like I said, but a few things I would like to see changed, but I know that's kind of killing the purpose of the distro, etc. But yeah, I'm plenty happy with it and very excited to see what next week's system will be. And also, Nate, I know you said that mine is on the list, but I was wanting to see if we could do that because I just pushed out a new XFC ISO and my KDE one is still being built, but that should be hopefully within a few minutes or so, giving or take my VM. And yeah, so I was wanting to plug for that this week if we can do that potentially.
Well, it's on the list. So I do have a lot of things on the list and some things already locked in, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So
okay.
Eris.
Oh, so I was gonna mention what Nazi said. He said that the reason why I was getting the widescreen is because XOR Minimal will not pull the drivers required by XOR for graphics, and that's probably why I got a widescreen. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Okay.
I also wanted to say that I found it weird with the package manager, how it's like xbps-install xbps-query, and it reminded me of AppGet, app search, or whatever it was before. I'm so used to now with the package manager name and then install or search or something.
So you prefer a unified tool rather than separate tools?
Yes.
Yeah, separate tools, but it's kind of like what Slackware does.
Yeah.
I have a little trick for this. In my BashRC, I have a shared BashRC between the distributions. I have a part of my BashRC that when I start a terminal, it looks for binaries. So if it finds the XBPS query binary, then it will set a number of aliases. So for XBPS install, it will be just install. XBPS remove will be just remove. If it doesn't find that, it keeps looking. If it finds Pacman, then it will set the same aliases for Pacman. And I have done that for Void, Arch, Debian, Fedora, and OpenSUSE. So if I put the same BashRC in any distribution with a common enough package manager, I can just use my default aliases for installing, removing, and searching and stuff and upgrading. It's kind of makes you lazy because you don't have to learn the syntax for each package manager. Sometimes when I do fresh install, I'm like, wait, how do I search? How do I list installed packages in Fedora? But yeah, it saves you the trouble of having to type like xbps- something.
Yeah, so one of the things that I do is I try to install Xrdp so I can do a remote desktop to.
Yeah, this is my favorite thing that you do with your testing.
Yeah, and with Void, that is not possible without compiling from packages, from development packages. So they do have a package request out there. It's been open a year and it's still open. And I don't typically build stuff from build and compile from packages. So I wasn't able to complete that. And so if their developers end up listening to this, maybe that'll help them with that
hopefully.
feature request.
I think that's I think it's a really neat I like what you test specifically, like your battery of tests, because you want to see if it'll fit in your workflow and the things that you do. And that's a really neat, and I'm going to say it every time you bring this up, because it does, you know, if for, I don't know what it is that you do in you know, in real life, you know, not just hopping around here, but it illustrates how Linux is used differently by different people, and to be able to satisfy all those different criteria, that's a feat in and of itself, really.
Well, I do cybersecurity during the day, and honestly, sometimes I don't want to install a Linux distro in my home network that is, you know, bringing something into my home. So I try to install in the cloud, and then when I install in the cloud, I want to be able to interact with it, like, you know, many users will you know, use remote desktop to, you know, hop on machines, and yeah, that's why I try to use Xrdp, and that way I can try a lot of things. It's not on my, you know, there's no chance that it'll ever infect my home network, any of the devices. So
that is so clever. I'm over here, SSH ports on everything, wide open. I mean,
but I do typically install in Vultr. DigitalOcean is great, but they don't allow you to download a specific ISO and use whichever ISO you want. So I use Vultr, and it's a very similar service to the great people at
DigitalOcean.
DigitalOcean. Yep, I love DigitalOcean. I do patronize them, but Vultr allows me to do the ISO.
Well, and the other thing with Vultr is that you can pick different data centers. Like DigitalOcean's great, but you only get like 3 or 4 choices, whereas Vultr's like you can pick. They have so many different co-locations. It's amazing.
And then the other part of it on cybersecurity is that I do is I used to use that to get me a platform on the cloud where I'm, you know, out there exposed and or secure, either way you want, and but I'm on the internet at internet speeds. You know, there's no limitations at that point. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
We'll have to pick your brain on things like that here in the near future, and hold that thought. Hold that thought, actually. All right, so areas you found difficult for Void Linux. Oh, okay, for me, the installer, and that's where things fell down there. But if there's anything like you want to maybe bring up that was difficult for you, and the documentation was brought up, how it wasn't sequential as it maybe should have been. But Shickle, go ahead.
I really don't know if it's me or not. I've got to try Pipewire. I know somebody mentioned that, but I have never been able to get sound working on Void. I don't know what it is, but sound just has not worked for me. At least in Chromium or Chrome. I haven't actually tested any other browsers, but nothing seems to play. So
I got it to work, but it was like at a very minimal thing. Like I said, you had no real control on it. Once you installed all the packages, also utilities and the pulse audio and all that, you know, you start up a song and it's at full volume in your headphones and blows your head off your torso, you know. So you have to go in and the terminal and open pulse audio or the ALSA mixer and bring everything down. And that's the biggest issue I have with it is I get sound, but I can't control it very easily.
That's interesting.
For me, it was either Pipewire or Pulse Audio. One first is XFC. If you install GNOME, I think it pulls Pulse Audio as a dependency. XFC doesn't pull anything. So when you install Pulse Audio, it will start up and work. With Pipewire, you have to go into your startup settings and you have to add Pipewire Pulse, and Pipewire Media. What is it? Pipewire Media session or something. So you have to start those manually, or at least have them in the audio start. But for example, I have an issue when, for example, my headphones would momentarily get unplugged, it would switch back to the other output, which is my HDMI, which I don't use for audio. So I had to go into PV control, and I had to disable it so it wouldn't try to go and fall back to the HDMI audio output. I'm not sure if it just generally pulls audio or if it was voice specific. But I had some issues when I would unplug my USB microphone and plug it back in, but it couldn't get it working, so I had to reboot the system. And I think, as far as I know, that only happened to me on Void. So the audio stack is what in my experience was a bit shaky. But it's on the other hand, I had very good experience with NVIDIA. So NVIDIA official NVIDIA drivers just work fine.
Anybody else have anything they want to contribute on areas they found difficult?
One thing I found that's weird is like when everything in the realm of Debian and Ubuntu kind of plays together well with permissions. So you could like use a Linux Mint ISO to start up to get into a Debian directory on your hard drive. You can't do that so easily with Arch. If you have Arch on your system, you're not going to get into it very easily and move stuff around because you get this permission of 1000 or something like that pops up.
That's usually a default user ID number.
Yeah, in Arch, it's like default user something like 1000, and it may let you play the file, but it will not let you delete it, move it, or anything like that with Arch.
Yeah, it's a permissions thing.
Yeah, permissions between Arch and Debian is like Arch don't like Debian, and this is our way of telling you that, you know?
I think the area of difficulty is mostly just because it is different enough from sort of everyday Linux, if you want to say that, where we're kind of all used to very refined user experiences, sort of, things are all sort of put together. And I think you characterized it very well at the beginning when you said that just felt like using Linux used to feel, used to like need to know a little bit more about your system. And there was a little less hand holding, a little more sort of expectation that you were managing your system. So I agree with that. I think that's, and I don't necessarily know that I would call that a difficulty per se, but it is certainly much more, I guess, hands-on. So
not a new user focused distribution.
I would rate it as tinkerer.
If I can get the spider off of it.
Yeah, I think like it does kind of make me feel a little bit like how like early Debian for me, like late 90s, early 2000s time frame for sure. Not easy. But if you're coming from an era, when you were on Windows and DOS in the 90s, it's you had to have that kind of knowledge anyway to install a system. So that jump wasn't very difficult. But for somebody new today, it's probably a lot more difficult.
That's a fair point. Yeah,
it's interesting because I've been in Linux less than 2 years, but on my first day of wanting to pick a distribution, my friend who was using Arch suggested Manjaro because he was just familiar with Arch, and I've been running Manjaro. I had been running Manjaro maybe for 5 months, and I got interested in Arch, which then I ended up in a situation where Arch and Pacman would be where I just had the most knowledge, where I was most comfortable. So I think from the jump from Arch to Void was significantly easier than if I just wanted to jump from something like Debian or Ubuntu.
Well, you are definitely not the typical user, so you probably have some other technical proclivities that not everybody else has.
Well, I don't code at all, so I'm not a developer, which is interesting.
Well, I don't know.
Maybe I just
maybe
have an affinity.
You're just smarter, like naturally. It could be.
I just decided to try Linux from scratch yesterday. I'm at a point where I can successfully do a CH root, but it's still like nowhere near done. Also, I wanted to mention with Void that with runit, what I find interesting is, so you have to manually create a soft link. But if you just do on the system this distro, just do system control and enable or start something. If you do system control enable service, it will just do the same thing. It will just create a soft link or multiple soft links. So why is there no command on with runit to do that? Because runit still has commands for stopping and starting services. I think it's sv up and sv down for starting and stopping. So why doesn't void and runit have a command for enabling and disabling to do the symlink creation and removal for you?
Sounds like something you'd want to ask at the, wherever they're hosting the code for that. And I mean, you might get a good answer for that. It might be that they tried it and it ran into problems, or they've thought about it, or it's on the roadmap, or who knows.
I've seen someone published an unofficial package that does the exact same thing. I haven't tried it. I mean, it's basically when you install something, because you still have to enable and disable services so rarely that it's not really, maybe that's it. It wouldn't be worth it for them, because maybe it wasn't. They had issues, but again, the average user might not have to enable and disable services every day, so it's not much of a concern, I guess.
Gotcha.
That's interesting.
All right. Well, I think we're at the point where we just want to sort of wrap up and move forward towards next week, but maybe we'll just give everybody one chance. Is there any sort of other thoughts you might have, or what would be your takeaway? And we don't all have to answer this. If anyone has anything that they've found that was more like profound about this, or kind of thought-provoking, or made you change the way you sort of think about the way you run your computer, or I don't know, anything like that, I think would be really interesting. Anyone have anything like that? I mean, I'll start it off just say that I have not had an interest in tinkering with Linux for a long time. I was just bored with the tedium. I was tired of dealing with, stuff like that. And this has finally, I think this sort of made me interested to try something that was more hands-on. So I am going to keep going with it and do at least a little bit more with it to see where I end up with it. So, Jinda, go ahead.
Once I got it working, I installed HTOP, and it is extremely lightweight. It was about half of what XFCE usually is. Probably because there was a few things missing I may have needed, but it's neither here nor there. It is a very lightweight distro. And I can understand why, like, the Steam OS is running Arch and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, if you want something lightweight and you want to be able to do it yourself, this seems like really the way to go.
I think for Steam OS, it was more of having access to more up-to-date packages, because the previous version of Steam OS was based on Debian, and Debian is infamous for having stable,
12.
very old package. Ubuntu 12?
Yeah.
Well, but Arch still has more up-to-date packages in Ubuntu. Yeah. Well, I could go on for one more hour about Void. So if nobody else wants, I would just restrain myself.
It's we've only got so much time. Eris.
So I was gonna mention that I think this distro, you need to augment the documentation. Maybe use the Arch Wiki, maybe use the Gentoo like partitioning. That would help a lot to know how to mount things, what you need to mount, how to make the swap. It tells you a little bit, but it's not very comprehensive. And I think there's the problem with the different desktops. It tells you how to install, let's say, KDE or GNOME, but the other ones are just not there, I think. So you would have to augment your information that way. And I also wanted to mention that Linux User Space had a Void episode where they go over all the history and their takes on what Void Linux is and how their experience was. So I'll just put the link in the YouTube.
Anybody else on any
I think where I got hung up on the installation is I was watching some YouTube videos too, including one of DT's latest ones. It's like 5 months old. Right when you get to the point where you're supposed to add that /boot for the first partition, he don't show you that. He skips right on and goes over to the next thing. So I kept getting hung up there. But all in all, with the Void Linux, it's been a learning experience for me. It's been a lot of fun. I didn't give it a really bad thing in the poll. I got it as, just below. I was having a great time with it. And yeah, it is something really different and lightweight, and I got some vision of what Linux used to be like.
I'm
All
not
right.
in a taxi cab or an elevator this week, Nate. So
Yeah, why you should give it a spin. So I can actually, so based on what I've heard, there are a vast number of packages that are in Void Linux, and they have up-to-date software, and actually probably more on the bleeding edge of what's available would be some of the key points. Unless somebody has anything else they would like to add to that, I'm sure Norbert, you have something you want to add to another reason. Short cab ride of why somebody should try Void Linux. Short cab ride.
Well, for me, it was when you get comfortable with using Linux in general, but then you want to try to get your head around how to manage your system with the command line. And when I was at the point when I felt comfortable with with Arch, and I basically haven't really used anything besides, I think, Debian, Ubuntu, Manjaro, and Arch. And I wanted to look for something that would be a next not next step to get deeper into Linux, and not in such depths as maybe Gentoo or something. And Void felt like the next option that looked appealing to me.
So you're saying that if you want to get deeper into Linux, this is a good stepping stone to go even further into the Void.
So, for example, if someone is, for example, comfortable with running the Debian and managing it from the command line or Arch, I think it's a good next step.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's good. Anybody else? If not, we're gonna put a little bit. Oh, Chickle. Yes, please.
I just think this is like the closest experience to BSD that we have on Linux. Like a lot of it feels very similar to me to using FreeBSD. So just it's pretty cool.
I like that. Thank you so much. That's great. All right, and then on that, let's talk about next week. So we're going to do something a little bit different next week. We're based on some feedback and some things. What people telling me about their level of participation with Linux Saloon. We're gonna try and change it up a little bit, and rather than do a distribution next week, we're gonna do something called an open mic night. Now this is not going to be Chickle singing or Jason singing necessarily, although that's not necessarily off the table either. What we're gonna do is we're gonna focus on topics that are in the community, and so one place you can post these topics are in the Telegram, hashtag open mic night, and I'll put a little announcement in there, or Eris will probably put an announcement in there because he's really the organized one of this. He keeps all the wheels greased. But also in the destination discourse forum, that's discourse.destinationlinux.network. You can go there and you can if you want to have long form conversations, because sometimes the Telegram just goes by way too quick throughout the day. I mean, I can. After working, whatever, I'm like, I miss so much of the conversation. So we can, we'll pull things from there as well, interesting topics. But it's an open mic night, so wherever a conversation goes organically, we'll talk about that. So it could be news, could be something interesting you're doing individually, or just maybe what we think about different things going on. So that's basically anything that's tech, open source, or Linux is on the table for discussion for that. So anyway, so that's what's going on next week. We will have another. We do actually have our next distro after that. We're not going to talk about that quite yet, but it's going to tie in with Linux user space. So that is coming soon, Eris, unless you have something else.
I wonder what it could be.
It's
a good question.
So Leo's not here to spoil it, and I don't want to say anything, so I'm gonna bite my tongue this week, so that next week we can we'll talk about that.
Well, they've already announced it on the show.
They did announce it on the show already.
They announced the next distro on the so the last one was MX. So on MX they announced the next, which is Slackware.
Okay.
Yeah, we already announced that. Yeah.
Oh Lord.
So Slackware is gonna be our next one, but we're not gonna kick that off now. I just want to screw things up. So we'll but next week, open mic.
All right.
All right. And then don't worry, Storm OS is on the list for future
That's
distributions.
fine.
But we have to do, we got a lot of pushing and pulling in the in the
Yeah.
underpinnings of this. So we gotta keep things
No,
flowing.
you're fine. You're fine.
And yeah, so all right. So next we're gonna do our open discussion. Some things around the community that have been, or the internet. This is kind of a free flowing and organic topic section. So news, item sources, and whatnot is what we're talking about now. No expectations for we're not gonna have to cover everything that's out there, but just whatever's going on. So I'd like to thank Michael from This Week in Linux for providing a great flight of news topics. And the first one I'm going to bring up, because I want to break from my normal, what I really want to talk about, and go to my number 2 topic, is Linutronics. Has anyone ever heard of that? The German-based Linux consulting firm, and they're focused on embedded Linux and real-time computing. Has anybody heard of this?
Not I.
Okay, so they're a small team, and they've been focusing primarily on embedded things and the work with the kernel. So what's interesting is they have been acquired by Intel. Now it's going to be an independent company. They're not it's not being absorbed into the company fully, but they've now acquired that. So now what are your thoughts on? So basically these developers now they got a pretty secure paycheck coming in now. And I know some people have reservations about anytime companies get involved in different aspects of open source, but at the same time, companies like Intel or AMD, even Microsoft, they're helping to propel all the free lickies and chewies that we get with Linux, through commercial means. Does anybody have any reservations about Intel acquiring embedded Linutronics? Linutronics. I'm sorry.
Linutronics. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to read what they do.
I think though, honestly, personally, my experience with Intel software on Linux has been pretty good as far as Intel Wi-Fi drivers on Linux tend to be fantastic for me at least. So I understand that they're a larger company. Their primary focus is making money, not being good open source citizens. And then we're gonna go.
But Thomas, you might give us a copyright strike if you're not careful.
That's fair. My point is, I'm not too concerned about it. I'd still keep my eye on it, but hopefully good things come out of it because Intel created Clear Linux, right? And that's a whole nother can of worms. But they made something that was interesting that helped push a little bit of performance focus in the Linux community. But they did something at least, and they contribute to the kernel at least.
Yeah, they do quite a bit. I put a couple of links in the chat for if you want to look at those articles. Phronix has a really good article. So I don't know if you want to check that out. But I find it I find this very interesting. I think this is going to be a good thing, because they still perpetuate the work that's being done by others. But I don't know. What do you think? So, anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's good that they're going to get a stable paycheck, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have the backing. But only time's going to tell what Intel is going to actually do with this company, and hopefully it is a good boost and goes in the positive direction. But only time will tell.
All right, and then this is actually an interesting article that might, or a news piece that might be directed more toward Mark and what he does, or maybe more than just Mark. But Podman4 was released. Does anybody here use Podman? It's a daemonless container engine for developing, managing, and running OCI containers on your Linux system. Containers can either be run as root or rootless mode. And so 4.0 was just released, and most significant release with 60 new features. The headliner is a complete rewrite of the network stack for improved functionality and performance, improvements to pods, improvements to Podman, Mac, and Windows support. And they see numerous new features added to allow sharing resources between containers in the pod. This is just beginning what they've planned. Eventually, they aim to have almost every option from Podman run available to pods to allow easy sharing of configuration options among containers within them. So I run Podman internally and on my network. It's actually it's a really nice system, actually. For like it does more than just containers. It does other system monitoring and tools and whatnot. So does anybody use Podman here?
What specifically are you using it for, Nate?
Well, containers, but it's a nice.
No, I get that, but what are you containerizing? What are you running?
I have so like things like Jellyfin. I can run that, and there's some other things too that I run like Docker containers, and it's really nice because I can actually search for containers right in Podman, and it'll install it for me. So I don't actually have to go. There's like it takes all the pain out of using Docker, and I think I think Docker's painful, personally, but it takes all that out and kind of manages it for you. Now I don't do a whole lot.
I believe the syntax is basically the same. They're interchangeable between the two, or at least they were for a while. I have not used Podman much, but it is something I need to look into more because they keep on saying that Docker is, not really something you should really be using anymore. At least that's what I hear.
Yeah, I've heard that too, but I think people are still using it. I mean, I didn't.
Well, a lot of people are still using it.
Is that because of the change in license now that like for a big organization you gotta pay now? Is that why? And there are other ways you can use the technology without using Docker?
I think they're trying to. I think part of that's maybe trying to push people towards Kubernetes, but I don't know exactly if there's another reason beyond that. Yeah.
Well, it is the IT realm, so it's been just long enough that people are starting to learn how everything works, and then now you got to change it all.
True.
So that you can.
You got to keep that magic going. Come on.
Right. It's called job security. I digress. Having come from that realm and understanding that anyway. Well, that's interesting that you use Podman and you found it useful, and it's something that has helped you run containers. They can certainly not always be the most user-friendly thing, that's for sure.
Well, the fact that you can actually just install right from Podman the different things to play with, that's actually really cool too. So it's almost like a package manager for Docker, like for containers. And it has a certain number of repositories it searches through, which I think is configurable. I don't know.
Yeah. This is a quick tangent, but I think the reason this always happens whenever there's something that's reasonably successful at solving some sort of problem, it never fails that people who don't really understand the technology decide that everything now has to run that way. So we went from virtualized systems to containerized software, and instead of it just doing the things that it was really good at, it was like, well, now we'll make everything a container, because that makes sense, right?
Right.
And that's exactly why I think it's why I was so frustrated with why I have been frustrated with containerization. Is containerization is great for certain things, but it's awful for others. Like try running a discourse forum. Tell me what you think of that experience. It doesn't need to run that way, but it does. So anyway,
I don't want to run any forum. That's why I'm letting Destination Linux run it for me.
Yeah, you're a very smart man. No
Pass
doubt.
the buck.
That's right. Let's be real here. I don't want to. There's some things I'm just not willing to do, and if Michael's going to do it, let him go for it.
Yeah,
let's stress on him, not on me. I mean, I'm not qualified to do that.
It makes life easier when you don't have to worry about it.
Yes, it does.
Oh my goodness.
So in app news, does anybody here use any kind of planning applications on Linux?
I've actually I've been looking at them. So I went through FlatHub and was just kind of looking at like the apps they have curated. But I'm curious. So what is your recommendation?
Well, I don't know what Schickel is first. He raised his hand.
Oh.
Yeah, he said he did something here.
So I first found out about an app called Planner back when I was using Elementary OS 5.0. But it's published in FlatHub and is actually not just an Elementary OS app.
It's not.
It's so good.
And actually, that is the exact application that was released 3.0.
Oh.
It's yep. So thank you very much. What a great segue.
So
So for those unfamiliar, Planner is a productivity app for keeping track of your tasks, projects, goals, and more. They completely redesigned the UI. It already looked good before, but the latest version really makes it look a lot more modern. So I don't know if you've updated your I don't know if it's in FlatHub yet, the version 3.0. But it has progress indicators for each project. You can organize your tasks by sections, drag and drop to create or order your tasks wherever you want, better integration with a dark theme, which is important to me. And I think it did it just for me too, which is great. So I appreciate that. And much more. So they can also synchronize your projects, tasks, and scheduling thanks to Todoist. So I don't know if anyone uses Todoist. And then also there's support for Todoist offline and work without the internet. So it can work without the internet connection and everything is reconnected and it will synchronize. So they also added support for subtasks and reminder support added as well. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link into the YouTube chat. But I think this is a super cool application. I only just started playing with it. And because I've got as of yesterday, I pulled an old project out of storage. And so I am creating a plan for it. And so this is the perfect tool. I've been looking around at different tools, and I think this is the perfect tool for it. So I'm pretty excited.
So I don't think this is something like specific to Planner, but it's part of why I use Planner. So Planner also has a thing where it runs in the background, and there's a hotkey you can press to add things to like task lists, like at any point in time. I use that very frequently. But because of Todoist sync, syncs to my phone, and I get like emails from Todoist about like times and dates and stuff. Whether you like Google reading your email and analyzing it is totally up to you, but I use the Google Assistant to like tell me about things going on. So anytime I add stuff to my planner, gets synced to Todoist and is in my email, all of the stuff that I'm doing on my Linux desktop, I get reminded about throughout the day by my phone. It works shockingly well. I have no idea how the algorithm decides what to show me or what not to, but so far it works.
Well, that's really cool. I don't really know much about Todoist. I only just looked it up, so that's pretty cool. Is it something you use, Eric?
Yeah, I've used it in the past. It's nice. It's a well thought out app in terms of just being able to have lists of things. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good app. I think I kind of got to a point where I was trying too many things, too many like combination to do things, planners, like it just time tracking. It was too much, and I kind of simplified and got rid of a lot of that, and Todoist sort of got cut. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago, though. So
okay.
So maybe it's time to revisit that.
Yeah. So then I have some more complicated projects. I think this might be good. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bash. I better cut you off.
No worries. I was going to say I'm going to check this out, but I think I'm going to try to do my task management in Obsidian just because I can also have all my notes and link them together and all that. So that's what I think one of the things I'm working on next, figuring out is the best way to handle more complex stuff in there.
Yeah, that Obsidian is very interesting too. I find that there's like a lot of just such good stuff that's out there right now. There's also like Libre Planner's another one. I know you can get the snap. And that's another really good one too that I'd like to play around with. I'm afraid that if I keep playing around with them, then I'm not actually going to get the tasks done I need to get done because I'm not actually planning it out.
That's exactly what happens. Yeah.
So somebody has to shoot the Nate and tell him to get to production immediately because it's not a good idea just to dilly dally around on this.
Yeah, and that's
go
ahead, Mark.
Can you put the planner link in the chat? There happens to be a GNOME app called Planner too.
That's the same.
So,
it's the same one.
It is. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So that's yeah, it's interesting to check out. I mean, a dark mode is important for me. That's kind of like That's key because it's just I can't stare at a white screen. So Shickle, we're gonna say?
Oh, the planner no map is different. This isn't.
Oh, is it different?
Yeah. I don't know if the other no map is developed anymore, but they are different.
Well, the planner I'm looking at in the news is the same one. It's updated in Flat Hub. So I don't know if that's GNOME Planner, but just called Planner.
It's just called Planner.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
all right, so I stand corrected.
Shickle, you're saying this is specifically, well, at least at some point it was an elementary app.
Yes.
Gotcha. Oh, yes, it is. I can tell as soon as I open it. And it doesn't have a dark mode, though, does it?
Which one?
I think
Planner.
There's a toggle in there somewhere.
Oh, I found it. Never mind.
Flatpak page. If you search Planner and then Flatpak, I think you'll find it.
I found it. Yeah, I got it.
You can use Discover if you're using Plasma. Discover has it.
I'm still on Pop. You know, and I hate to be negative. I apologize, but the worst part about Pop to me is the Pop Shop, because it is it freezes up all the time. It does every time you open it, it has to check for updates instead of.
Same for me.
And it's really frustrating. I wish they could just tell it not to check for updates continuously. But
I'm not sure if I just got unlucky, but when I first tried Pop and I did the system upgrade after installation, it just crashed. But it happened twice.
I've been running it for several weeks, and it runs fine. It's just the Pop Shop is not great.
The GNOME store does that for me on just about every distro. Like opens up and then it just freezes like it needs a complete cache refresh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually find PopShop a little when I was running. That's the only thing. It'll come up a little bubble that you've got these updates to do, but then it's got to go through this whole cycle again when you go in there to do the updates. It just keeps going on and on and on.
Yeah, and it freezes frequently. Like go in and I don't realize that it's trying to do yet another refresh, and I start typing a search, and I also don't like that it does real-time search. I mean, I know that a lot of people expect that now, but it's annoying whenever it's like trying to search as I'm typing, and if I misspelled something. Anyway, I just think it's not a great experience, and it's surprising because so much else of Pop has been like delightful, like the way it's put together. And
all right, so
I'd have to think it's
anyway.
Sorry,
I didn't mean to get us off on a tangent.
Go ahead. What do you say, Colin?
I was going to say I have to think it's something that they're still implementing within Pop OS, because they're still sort of and now they're rewriting in Rust and all that sort of thing. So maybe once they get that achieved, it'll probably be a lot more fluid, I would think.
Maybe.
I was going to say, so any shortcomings that the Pop Shop might have, they make up for in just the name itself, calling it the Pop Shop. That's just me, though. So take that for what it's worth. It's useless, but I still like the name. The name excites me. All right, I have one more story that I want to cover because this one's strikes a little bit close to home for me. So there was a vulnerability found in Ubuntu snaps, the local root vulnerability in snap confine. They discovered a vulnerability in the discovery vulnerability in the snap confine component in Ubuntu snaps packaging system. So a successful exploitation of this vulnerability allows any unprivileged user to gain root privileges on the vulnerable host. The quality research team has discovered multiple vulnerabilities in the snap confine function on the Linux operating system, the most important of which can be exploited to escalate privileges to gain root privileges. Highly recommends to apply patches as soon as possible.
Can I ask how easy it is to exploit, though? Because we keep hearing, oh, there's all these vulnerabilities on Linux. There's root, privilege escalation, and it's always something like, but you have to be physically in front of the machine, or like there's. It
is only a local exploit. It's not remotely exploitable, so it's only a local exploit. So, but I imagine it's only in the snap confine. So I mean, it's going to. I don't know how many snaps you run, if you run any. Eris.
Well, I was going to mention that the researchers said that they noticed that snap is written very defensively, and they struggle a little to find the exploit in general. But just before they were about to give up, that's when they actually found it. So I think that's noteworthy.
So Vince says in the chat, in the YouTube chat, that the good thing the snap vulnerability was patched very quickly. So tip, keep your system up to date. All right, and that brings us to the end here. I'd like to, for last call, I want to bring up some things that are going on this week. I know Rick isn't here, the Not a Linux Guru. Wednesday night he does a stream. He's a regular here. Mark, you have your Atlanta Linux users group. Is that meeting tomorrow?
That's right. Every Sunday from 3 to 6 Eastern, and you find that at ale.org, ale.org.
ale.org. And then Steve, I'm pretty sure he's going to have his, because I saw the notification, he's going to have his coffee clash tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Central or 9 a.m. if you're living on the East Coast. Destination Linux is streaming live tomorrow afternoon, 1 p.m. So if you want to catch that, it'll be on this same channel, dlnlive.com. You can check that out. Linux Out Loud, we got the name change is basically done, although still the underpinnings still say DLN Extend. So, but that will drop on Wednesday. Wendy did all the hard work editing it, and I think I owe her something still. I don't remember. Linux User Space, the show just dropped. Eris helped me out here. Was it? I think I got a notification in my Patreon again. I can't recall.
It dropped last week, I think.
Okay.
And they mentioned, I don't know. Actually, I don't remember what day it was, but they did mention that they were going to do Slackware next time, and that will be in 2 weeks, the 14th, the episode.
I think this Monday, so next Monday. So now, sorry, so 2 days from now is the next episode, because they have the episodes bi-weekly, and the previous one was 2 weeks ago.
That'll drop on the 14th of March.
Yeah, and it will be topic based, and then 2 weeks from then will be the Slackware episode.
And if you want more on me, you can go to keepitclean8.com. I do things there. So I want to thank you all for being a part of the conversation in both the Zoom meeting and in the YouTube stream, as well as everyone watching after the fact. I want to thank you, everyone involved in making the Linux and open source tools possible for us to not only have this conversation, but also to have fun and enjoy your technology. Linux truly puts personal back in a personal computer. Thank you for stopping by. Be sure to tip your developers, and please always remember to Linux responsibly. Until next time, see yas.
Bye.
Oh, and remember,
Bye,
next
everyone.
week, open mic night next week. So bring your Linux singing voices, or not.
So I can talk about Void Linux all I want.
You can sing about it.
Yeah. Or you can put me in a container if you get